Hello, everybody. My name is Gail Upchurch, and I want to share with you a day in the class lesson. This one is about stakeholder groups for English 0100S. So I'm going to share my screen. Um, and let's just go through a few slides. We're going to start here, and then I'm actually going to show you how the activity unfolds on a real sheet of paper, analog, old school pen and paper. But let me just run through how I tend to do it. So why stakeholder groups? Stakeholder groups are important for students working on research papers for a few reasons. One, it helps students discover the parties interested in their chosen research topic or issue. It helps to deepen their engagement with their topic, and it also helps identify or help students identify opponents they'll need to address later in their research writing process. So here's an example of an activity. A lot of times with this kind of activity, I sort of come in with a 8.5 by 11, just plain white sheet of computer paper, and I give everyone a blank sheet, right? And I have them on the top of their paper write down their issue or their topic, and I just I let them hold right there for a moment. And then I give them oral directions. A lot of times I'll say move your paper to the left or to the right. It really just depends on how many students are present in any one day. Mostly I say move it to your partner next to you or move it to your peer who's sitting next to you, right? Or behind you or in front of you. And what I want them to do is take a good look at whatever sheet they have in front of them, because it'll be a new sheet. What is their peers' topic? What is their peers' topic or the issue that they are planning to take on in English 1010 for the research paper? So I say, help them out, right? This is a bit of community service for all of us. I ask them to write one possible stakeholder, right? An interested party, right? Someone or some group that would be interested in the issue that their peer has mentioned or written on the top of the sheet, whatever it is, okay? And then they take a stab at it and they think about it for a second. What groups would be interested? And then they write that down. I want them to take one step further and then write down what that stakeholder would be interested in, right? Interested in what ways, to what extent, right? And they just do that once. And then once everyone's finished, a lot of times I'll put a timer on it and I'll say, 5 minutes, write down a stakeholder group. Why are they interested? If some students complain that 5 minutes isn't enough time, that's okay. I have them raise their hand and I can always add a couple more minutes to my timer. Then I ask them to move their sheet again in the same direction, next to them, to the peer next to them, in front of them, or behind them, okay? They move it again, and now what they've got is yet another peer's paper in front of them, a new issue, and at least one stakeholder group. I'm asking them to identify one other stakeholder group. And it's important that they don't duplicate, right? So they'll jot it down. They'll probably follow the model of the student who went before them. I will reiterate the instructions, give them another 5 minutes to do it. If they need more time, I'll give it. And then at this point, I say, there's choices. I can either, if it's going really well, I might say, let's move it one more time. Therefore, presumably everyone would have their own topic and 3 stakeholder groups that their peers have provided for them. Or if it looks like it's kind of a dud and students aren't getting into it, I might stop here at 2. Then students will give the papers back to the original student. They will see what their peers have been working on, and then I ask them some questions, right? So the post-activity discussion, and by the way, this activity can go on for an entire class session. It really just depends on the excitement and the enthusiasm around these stakeholder groups, around the activity itself, how long it takes them to get through each cycle. But the discussion is really where it's at, everybody. So once students have their original sheet, I'm asking them to think of any other stakeholders. I might even ask for students to read off what their peers have written for them. And we can all kind of comment. And we can all talk about not just the stakeholders, but also the ways in which those stakeholders would be interested. Maybe it's on the sheet, maybe it's not. Maybe there's something on the sheet that serves as a kernel of some other really interesting ideas that the class can chip in on. So it becomes a really nice community building activity, as well as something generative for each member of the class. And then I want us to think about next steps. So we've got this sheet, which I encourage them to keep and in a folder for their research writing process. And in my English 0100S classes, we do a lot of process work for each one of the major assignments, but particularly for synthesis and the research paper. Definitely a lot of these shorter kinds of assignments. Well, I love to see these sorts of things, right? And keeping them in like a manila folder, nothing really expensive. I supply them the folder, can be really helpful. I ask students if they can think about ways that they agree with one of the stakeholders' positions or what the stakeholders might be interested in, right? Without doing any big research, this is just something that they're thinking, right? Do they agree or disagree and why, right? And asking those kinds of questions can be fruitful as well. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm just going to show you what it might look like with my students. So let's say, for example, a student is talking about banning books, right? And this is a potential research question. It could start this way too. Should books be banned? All right, so they're there. I would ask that they put their names on the top so that we know who the original student is. And then I'm going to ask for that student to pass it to the left or right, okay? So I'm going to just mimic that right now. I am the new peer, and I'm just going to write down a potential stakeholder group. All right, so I'm going to write down the stakeholder group and then what they might be interested in, what interests them here, or what concerns them, right? Might be another way to state this. Parents might be afraid. Okay, so I wrote something down that's super general. All right, see if you can see that there. Oh, we're out of focus. Jeez. There we go. Should books be banned as an issue, right? Or a research question? Parents might be the stakeholder group, one stakeholder group. And this is why they're interested in this. Parents might not, trying to get the, parents might be afraid for their students to read inappropriate material, okay? So that might be an interest of one of those stakeholder groups. That may not be the only interest or concern of parents, but it might be one, all right? There's ways that this can be broken down a little further, right? To talk about inappropriate, what the student means when they say inappropriate. So we can have a conversation about how we can narrow that as well, right? So no books with sexual content, no books with content that goes against their religious practices at home or something like that, okay? So it's not about right or wrong, right? I'm not asking students to argue anything at this juncture, but just to identify it, just so that they are aware and they're thinking about this issue on on all sides, for all, for all, on all sides, okay? Another one might be, and I'm going to end the video here because I think it's getting too long. Another one could be the students themselves. Students. Okay. So I'm gonna try to get that sweet spot where it's not blurry. Another one might be students. We can read that. Students want to have the freedom to read what they want, all right? So that might be what the sheet looks like there. Okay. Oh, sorry, it's so blurry. All right. And so on and so forth. And then we move it to the left or right and we have a conversation. All right. So I hope this has been helpful. It's a really fun activity. It gets them engaged. It gets them off the computer for a while. And I like it. So thank you everyone for your attention. Bye.